Mayor Seaman?
Here.
Councilmember Castellano?
Here.
Councilmember Molden?
Here.
Councilmember Arroyo?
Here.
Councilmember Bauer is absent tonight. Councilmember Burgell?
Here. Thank you very much. Now if you will please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, do we have a report out of the closed session?
Mayor, no reportable actions were taken in closed session.
Thank you very much. Now it is time for the mayor's announcements. And I will start actually by inviting Shannon Fazio from our Community Services Department to come and tell us all about Get Out and Play Day, which is going to be the end of this month already.
Mayor and Council, thank you so much for having me. I would like to invite all of you to our 7th annual Get Out and Play Day. It's going to be Saturday, July 31st. Obviously, we had to pause last year due to the pandemic, so we're
Excited to be offering the event this year. It is going to be slightly modified because we're still in COVID, but we have a lot of fun things going on. There's going to be free rides on the Madigat. Sequoia Park Zoo is going to be offering free admission for children with paying adult. We're going to have free day at the Clark Museum and a street fair out front. And there will also be the Family Olympics at Sequoia Park and a skateboard competition at Cooper Gulch.
Right on. And because I didn't turn on your microphone early enough, can you repeat the date?
Yes, we're going to be taking place on Saturday, July 31st, and I did bring some of our maps and pamphlets. These are going to be available to the public next week. I've also brought all of you posters so that you can share those, but we're also going to be distributing those at the end of this week.
So if you have never been to Get Out and Play Day before, it is a ton of fun.
It is.
And it's everywhere. And the weather here is nice enough that you can actually get out and play and not get too
hot. Yeah.
Too hot. So this is the great place to get out and play at.
Yes. Any questions? Okay.
Anybody want to challenge anybody to a push-up contest there?
Well, the Slattery family and the Fazio family have a ongoing rivalry with the Family Olympics, so.
I don't know if you call the result a rivalry.
We'll see.
Well, that is awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
We're looking forward to the return of that day.
Yes, we are too. We're really excited to be hosting it. Okay. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks.
And other than that, I just have some announcements of things that I have been doing. One of them is that last week, as a volunteer for the Red Cross, I responded to my first fire call as part of a disaster action team. I'm not generally part of a disaster action team, but they're very low on volunteers. It was the middle of the night. A family of 8 had to get housing that night. It was really an opportunity to see how important the work is by the Red Cross. And it was really fulfilling. And if anybody's interested in volunteering, they're really shoring up their volunteer base. It's a lot better than it was last year, but we haven't even hit fire season. So it's for homes and fires within the region, and it's also for those big, massive fires that are inevitable. So if you want to do some really good work, it's the time to volunteer is before the disaster happens, because it's really hard for them to train you when it's going on. So call early. I also just wanted to say I've been meeting with members of the Humboldt Housing Authority Board. The Humboldt Housing Authority is an interesting organization that is federally funded. It has a county and a city board, but those boards then don't really have any relationship to the city. So it's been a lot of sort of piecing together things to figure out how we can work together more cooperatively and help them and have them work with us in our housing goals. So it's been really great to get to talk to those folks. Tomorrow, July 21st from 3 to 4:30, the Prosperity Network is going to be hosting a Zoom meeting. It's a general meeting about internet connectivity. We've talked a whole lot about broadband recently, And broadband is the infrastructure, but a lot of people really just want to understand how am I going to get better internet at my desk, at my business. So we're going to talk not just about emerging business opportunities from the Trans-Pacific fiber optic cable, but also how can we work with our local providers? What tools do we have to maybe incentivize them to give us better and more reasonably priced services? And we're going to have Greg Gare from the Carson Block building, who totally wired their building for tech as they restored it, talking about how to best prepare your building to wire for tech. So it's going to be super interesting. We'll also have some small group discussions about things like telehealth and remote workers and what are the challenges and opportunities that come from that. So if you're available tomorrow, it's the 21st from 3 to 4:30. You could email gohumco@ca.humboldt.ca.us to get a Zoom link, or you can just email me and I can get it to you. Eureka Main Street, we're going to be hosting our first general membership meeting on July 26th. There will be two on that day, one at 8:30, one at 5:30, so that the most possible businesses can attend. If you're free in the morning or the evening, you'll have a choice. So that's a great thing. And we hope to get a lot of participation and see a renewed energy around the Main Street district for sure. On July 30th from 10 to 11 a.m., the State Controller's Office is going to be hosting a webinar for businesses that will help them understand how the State Controller's Office can benefit them. It's an online webinar, but we're also going to meet here in council chambers with somebody from County of Humboldt, City of Arcata, City of Fortuna, to talk about, besides the State Controller's Office, what do our local jurisdictions have available to support businesses. And finally, Good Neighbor Week is coming in a while. It's the end of September. But it is not too early to start thinking about how you might want to have a block party or a neighborhood cleanup or a neighborhood yard sale. And we still do have grants available through our mini grant program. So if you would like to do something in your neighborhood, start planning now and look online, and you could apply for one of those grants for up to $500 to help pay for your event. And that is the end of my mayor's report. So now we will move on to the public comment period. Do we have anybody here who would like to make a public comment?
Mayor, we did have 3 members who signed up, and then I have one person who I'm going to be calling. So I'll call the first person up is Cornelius Lowenstein.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We got to get used to the not walking up anymore thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm asking the council to pass a resolution declaring that the city of Eureka stands in solidarity with the brave people of Cuba in their quest for liberty and civil rights. Having grown up for 14 years behind the Iron Curtain, as a grandson of anti-fascists and Holocaust survivors, I witnessed the real existing socialism, aka the absence of freedom of press and personal speech, no right to exercise one's faith openly, and harassment and persecution at the hands of secret police firsthand. Something that is unfathomable in America, thank God. The merger of press, police, and politics is a clear hallmark of any totalitarian system. The silencing of dissent and outcasting of those that didn't sing the praise of Joseph Stalin is still a vivid memory of mine. We that uphold and cherish a free and open society and our beloved Constitution should all openly condemn socialism, no matter if on the radical right or based on nationalism, or on the left trying to usher in an agenda-driven policy of government dependency and the abolishment of free markets, entrepreneurialism, and freedom of speech and association. As a first-generation immigrant, America held the promise of freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for me, having been told by my grandparents and uncle that this great and noble and free nation saved us from the camps, and my mother and her sister were born during exile. So totalitarianism is the last thing I ever want to experience again, and we as a city should stand in solidarity with the Cuban people and declare Eureka a sanctuary city for everyone who stands up for freedom and liberty and against the horrors of communism and socialism and its ugly tentacles of oppression, suppression, depression, and turning whole countries into open-air concentration camps. Historically, those that opposed Hitler barbarism were also clear and declared opponents to the horrors of Stalinism, Bolshevism, Titoism, and America gave shelter, a voice, like the American Guild for Cultural Freedom, and even justice to those brave enough to stand up to totalitarianistic despots, small or large. You, as the representatives of us free Americans, should publicly condemn any form of biased press and the persecution of political dissidents. Eureka, I founded liberty and freedom for the individual. And in the vein and tradition of the great Berlin-born humanist and friend of the American people, Alexander von Humboldt, any form of socialism we should be diametrically opposed to. Fight the beginnings, they said in Franco, Spain. Thank you, and God bless America.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dennis Mayo.
Pass these out to the board. While they're passing that out to you, I just wanted to give a shout out for the Zoom meeting for the Prosperity Center. Anybody that can sit in on that should. It's really rewarding, and it's a way that the public can actually interact in a way that they want to. Your ideas are listened to. Anyway, this is a letter from Chuck Ellsworth. Dear Mayor and City Council, please express our city's formal support for the brave and historic and heroic Cuba Libre movement attempting to bring democratic reform to the citizens of that island nation. A reformed, free, and open Cuban society, allied with North America, will position that nation to become the most influential political force in the South American hemisphere. I hope you folks can find a path forward to join this movement to help liberate our Cuban friends. Signed by Chuck Ellsworth, 4th Ward, the Bridge District resident. And I urge you to contact Chuck and help us. Let's work on a resolution. I presented this to the Board of Supervisors today, and we're going to proceed on this. This is very important stuff, and we need to make a statement. The city needs to make a statement, so does the county. This is huge, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Steve Parr.
I wanted to start out by saying last time I spoke in front of you all, I walked away with such a feeling of disregard and disrespect that I was blown away. So I'm hoping that y'all can sharpen up this time and at least pretend to give a flying fuck about what your constituents have to say. First off, I totally support what Dennis and Cornelius have just said about the Cubans. I do believe that that's an important thing. I mean, they're fighting for what we fought for 250 years ago, and now we're giving up on a regular basis. Other than that, I have a lot of things to say that would take more than 3 minutes. And what I would like to suggest is that rather than having these little scenarios where you all sit up there like gods in your throne and we come up as peons and speak our minds for 3 minutes and get totally disregarded, I would like to suggest a series of town hall meetings where we all sit at the same level and actually have discussions about things. I don't think that spending hundreds of thousands of our dollars to put banners up on the 5th, 4th, and 5th Street to draw the tourist's eye away from the homeless in the doorways and their needle litter and their crap on the street. I don't think we need to put lipstick on a pig. I think we need to actually sit down and discuss ways to make this town a better place instead of just trying to make it look like a better place. And that's what I'm suggesting is a series of town hall meetings where we can actually get together and talk about things. Okay.
Thank you. I was going to say, can we have them speak while you're doing your call? So if there's anybody else, come on up.
I really appreciated the last time around we did there was a land acknowledgement. I don't know if we're doing that every time or sometimes, but I'll just like to say Wiat Nopo. Thank you to the Wiat people whose land we're on, who the United States has illegally occupied by violent force for 240 years, which is an active and ongoing illegal occupation of genocide, land theft, and one of the worst human atrocities in history. Still happening. As somebody who's not an immigrant, whose family's been here for 12,000 years, and this is my ancestral territory, I would like to say that the United States did not bring freedom and democracy to my people. I was going to talk about the Eureka Police Department and these officers that you still haven't fired, and it's the new city manager's responsibility to fire these bigoted, racist, sexist, sexual abusers, and police killers that are on your police department. And it's a national problem because the Democratic Party's response to the largest protest against police brutality in this country was to put a cop in the White House alongside a man who passed the crime bill that destroyed people of color's lives, millions. So we really need some real opposition to the corrupt policing in the United States that's based on racism, and the United States in general, which actively holds a torture chamber illegally on Guantanamo Bay on Cuba. And in the UN, only Israel and the United States voted to continue this blockade that even though Cuba saved the world with during this COVID-19 crisis by exporting doctors and vaccines all over the world, they don't have enough syringes to give their own people vaccines because of this 40-year-long blockade that makes it impossible for them to trade with anyone else in the world. Certainly, the United States suggesting that they need to bring freedom to Cuba after they've been torturing Muslims with no sight of ever seeing a trial in the stolen Cuban land of Guantanamo Bay is preposterous and frankly a joke. Knowing as somebody whose family was hoarded into open-air concentration camps during the Pomo Death March in 1855, I can say that the United States has no place discussing freedom and democracy anywhere in the world, except for here at home, when they're launching coups. The United States is backing coups in Venezuela, whose elections are more credible than our own. Our pathetic U.S. elections that are based on the electoral colleges where your vote doesn't matter, but in 11 swing states. It's preposterous that the United States would ever do that. So I support Cuba, the Cuban Revolution, long live Che and Fidel Castro.
Oh, we have the person on the phone, and then we'll get you next, okay?
Has it started?
No. We've got somebody on
We
the
have a
phone.
speaker on the phone,
And then I'll
we'll
call you up.
take you next. Okay, thank you. Emily, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Okay. Do I have 3 minutes or?
You have 3
Hello?
minutes, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, my name's Emily. I live in Arcata. I'm part of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and I work with the Humboldt Peace and Freedom Party locally. I coordinated and attended a protest last year to call for no war with Iran. I was being watched from across the street by 2 SUVs full of cops who were exchanging text messages talking about how they wanted to beat me up. I think that this is absolutely inappropriate. I understand that the investigation is still ongoing, but more than just the 2 sergeants should be on pause with pay. You know, and just, matter of fact, I understand that it's like necessary for them to be paid, but I think that the city council needs to put out a statement saying that they don't agree with the fact that they should be being paid and that they actually have to do it. I would like for you guys to speak out about the fact that they're getting paid. If I screw up at my job, I don't keep getting paid when I don't show up the next day. So, or I'm told not to come back for a week. I also would like to bring attention to the 4 overdoses that just happened in the prison. And my question for you is, if these people are dealing with addiction, why are they in the prison? why aren't these people getting help? The help they actually need. Probably better social services, obviously some help with addiction. And these prisons, while a lot of people think that this is a way out of drug use, it is the most humiliating, degrading possible way to be forced out of an addiction. And it's totally inhumane. So instead of praising the officers for giving them Narcan, which I'm glad they had, that's really awesome, but these people don't belong in prison. We need to divert the funds for these cops to social services that will actually benefit the community and will stop the whatever that word is, where people go in and out of the prison system. That's about all I have to say. There was one more thing, but I can't remember. I have a couple more seconds. Yeah, please make a statement saying that you don't agree with cops being paid. Please put more cops on leave, and let's divert the funds now. We don't need to wait for this investigation to be done. We already know what is necessary. We've seen it all across the United States. There's so much evidence that cops don't help.
Emily,
So
your
we don't
3
need to-
minutes are up, Emily. Thank you.
Okay.
All
Sorry,
right.
I didn't hear the little beep.
I
Please,
know
no
it's hard
copying.
to do it this way.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I see we have somebody waiting. Go ahead.
Yes. My name is Rainer Shea. Don't want to dox myself. A March 17 article published by the Sacramento Bee revealed disturbing text messages in a group chat of Eureka police officers sent between January and August of 2020. The text messages display racist, bigoted, misogynist, above-the-law attitudes. These officers have a complete disregard for the individuals in the community that they serve. The institution of policing has harbored these attitudes and behaviors for too long, and the community will not take it anymore. We want systemic change. We want all law enforcement to be held accountable to their community. The community demands this accountability. These officers must be fired for our community to feel any semblance of safety, especially for our most vulnerable. After they are fired, help divert the funds to a program similar to Eugene, Oregon's Cahoots, Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets, which is an innovative, community-based public safety system to provide mental health first response for crises involving mental illness, homelessness, and addiction. American Journal of Preventative Medicine estimated that 20% to 50% of fatal encounters with law enforcement involved an individual with a mental illness. Last year, out of a total of roughly 24,000 Cahoots calls, police backup was requested only 150 times. The cost savings are considerable. The Cahoots program budget is estimated to be about $2.1 million annually, while the combined annual budgets for the Eugene and Springfield police departments are $90 million. In 2017, the Cahoots teams answered 17% of the Eugene Police Department's overall call volume. The program saved the city of Eugene an estimated $8.5 million in public safety spending annually. We need to get the dangerous texting squad off the streets and direct city funding to a program that has showed significant success for 31 years. Our community deserves this. Please sign our petition at change.org called Fire the Texting Squad.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak on public comment? All right. Seeing none, I will close that, and I will open up public hearings. And our first item is Betty's Community Housing Coastal Development Permit, and so I will invite Principal Planner Getz.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. Staff is excited to bring to you tonight the Coastal Development Permit application for Betty's Community Housing. The proposed project will utilize 12 donated PG&E construction trailers to provide rental housing for up to 40 people. The purpose of the project is to help individuals struggling to secure permanent housing establish rental history. The standard of review for the City's Certified Local Coastal Program, or LCP for short. The project is located on a vacant city-owned parcel on the inland side of Hillficker Lane, known as the South Crowley property. The site is located between the Humboldt Bay Fire Training Facility to the north and the wastewater treatment plant to the south. The City Council recently approved amendments to the city's LCP to change the land use and zoning on this parcel so that the proposed multifamily housing use is principally permitted. The project includes 6 individual trailers separated into 2 living units each, and they have shared kitchens and bathrooms, along with 1 large structure constructed out of 6 of the construction trailers. The proposed large combined trailer structure will have the potential to accommodate up to 28 living units, with 1 communal kitchen and 2 bathrooms. There will also be office space in the large structure for caseworkers to meet with their clients, and the development will include a 24-hour on-site supervisor who will occupy one of the units. The project will receive water and electricity by connecting to existing utilities that run along Hillficker Lane, and a new sewer lift station will be installed, as well as the new sewer force main connecting to the adjacent wastewater treatment plant. As you can see from the aerial image from 1997, a portion of the southern Crowley property was previously filled to accommodate a bulk fuel tank farm. The proposed development will be consolidated within the northwestern corner of the footprint of the former tank farm on approximately 0.81 acres of the 6.1 acre parcel. The project is proposed with a minimum 30-foot wide buffer from pocket wetlands within the former tank farm footprint, a minimum 100-foot buffer from higher quality wetlands on the unfilled eastern and southern portions of the subject parcel, and a 60 to 80-foot wide buffer from the Elk River salt marsh habitat, which is across Hillficker Lane to the west of the parcel. A reduced buffer analysis was prepared by a qualified biologist, which demonstrates the proposed buffers are adequate to protect the resources of the habitats. To avoid the wetlands between the project footprint and the treatment plant, the proposed new sewer main will be installed via directional drilling. The project area will be fenced to avoid human encroachment into the wetlands, and a new vegetated drainage swale will be constructed between the development footprint and the wetland buffers to retain, infiltrate, and/or treat runoff. In addition, city staff is recommending a number of permit conditions to ensure protection of surrounding habitat. These include landscaping and exterior lighting restrictions, and construction phase requirements to avoid nesting birds and impacts from potential buried contamination, directional drilling frack out, and erosion and polluted runoff. As conditions, staff believes the project is protective of surrounding environmentally sensitive habitat area and is consistent with the LCP. The other major issue of concern at the project site is risk of coastal hazards. The proposed residential units will be elevated on anchored foundations with a minimum floor elevation of 1.5 to 2.5 feet above the base flood elevation, consistent with the city's flood hazard area regulations. To address potential increasing flood hazard with sea level rise, staff is also recommending a condition imposing a 30-year limit on the coastal development permit that requires a reevaluation of hazard risk prior to permit reauthorization. In addition, staff recommends a condition requiring a site-specific tsunami evacuation plan since the project is located in the tsunami run-up area. As conditioned, staff believes the project minimizes hazard risk, also consistent with the LCP. Today, the California Coastal Commission actually suggested modifying the language on 2 of the conditions of approval. The first is Condition 8, which waives the right to add shoreline protection in the future to protect against hazards such as sea level rise, storm surge, and erosion, and describes the types of hazards that may occur. It also adds language prohibiting the use or requiring the removal of the improvements on the site if a governmental agency orders it in the event of one of the described hazards occurring. I've also provided a copy to you at your stations tonight. So, the second suggested modification is to Condition 11, which places limitations on development. The suggested language reinforces the use of the site is temporary, and it adds in that the 30-year time limit for the coastal development permit to be effective was chosen because it coincided with the time when, based on current data, sea level rise could impact the site. So for all these reasons, staff recommends the City Council hold a public hearing and approve the coastal development permit with the conditions contained in the draft resolution of approval and the addition of the modifications suggested by the Coastal Commission. The City Council decision to approve the coastal development permit is appealable to the Coastal Commission. And the recommended motion is available here with the language to add the suggested modification in red, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
All right, do we have any questions? Did I see movement over here? Oh, Councilmember Bolton.
This may be totally out of left field. I was just thinking about the area of town where this is proposed and adding a number of residences over presumably residents who are more likely to be pedestrians. Is there anything in any of these plans or anything in the more general public safety works about the dangers of crossing Broadway, where if we're going to be putting more people living in that particular area immediately across Broadway from places where people tend to want to go, like Wind Cove for easy shopping and things like that?
There was not any considerations for crossing Broadway. There are sidewalks on the west side of Broadway so that they could gain access to traffic signals in the area.
Okay. And just for your information too, the 101 multimodal corridor plan is really looking into those and hopefully some short-term efforts as well.
That's kind of what I was wondering, because when the multimodal corridor plan was, looking at where people tend to use the area and where people tend to cross, and I was wondering if this is going to change how many people and where they tend to cross. Yeah.
I think that the access and the quicker access to get to places like Winco would probably be to use the trail and get to Truesdale, which there's a safe crossing at, and then get across the other side where there is pedestrian access. And we can talk to Betty about, informing the residents about that.
Letting folks know that that's the safe way to go about it. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, then I will open up the public hearing and ask, do we have any comments from the audience on this item for the public hearing?
Hi, I'm here tonight to read a letter from my friend that couldn't make it tonight. So I'm going to read the letter regarding this project. I, Ann White, continue to object to the Betty Chin development on Humboldt Bay. I am also writing in opposition of the project to preserve my right to an appeal if the project is approved. This project wholly ignores the Coastal Act. It will destroy wildlife and their habitat. The project will degrade aesthetics and impact public use of the bay. The property has 3 functioning wetlands. It is filled with native wildlife and native plants. 30 years ago, the land had oil storage tanks on it, but now, after 30 years, it has recovered and returned to a native wildlife habitat, complete with mostly native flora. Governor Newsom signed an executive order in October 2020 to preserve 30% of California's coast and wetlands for preserving our wildlife and their habitat. President Biden signed the 3030 executive order this year, 2021. Development of this 6.5 acres open space and wildlife habitat will be done in direct opposition of the executive order. The project will destroy one of the last parcels of open space and wetlands in Eureka and on Humboldt Bay. The Crowley property should be zoned open space and restored and preserved for the future of all and the health of Humboldt Bay. This is simply the wrong site for this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Janelle Laker. First, a bit of history. In 2014, November 2014, this site was one of several identified for a camp. Sometime later, I talked with a member of the Coastal Commission, Mr. Baskin, and he told me this site was inappropriate due to wetlands. A year later, when I read negative comments on Facebook about the Blue Angel Village on Washington, I contacted CCC and found out that the city had not taken action for the site, and I was assured that the commission would take steps to protect Betty's. Sometime later at a supervisors meeting, Rex Bone commented that the Coastal Commission was blocking this project, the trailers. I told him that was not the case. The city had not acted to provide the paperwork to the Coastal Commission. Honestly, I wish I had suggested that he find another site. But I didn't. That was a few years ago. A lot of work has gone into this. However, this is an expensive and with all the requirements, an inappropriate site for these trailers in her project. I realize that a huge amount of work has gone into this. But with all due respect, you should vote no, or at least take another look at using this site. This is not about Betty. It is about the site and to develop it. It's about the environment and appropriate coastal development. And I sent a more depth, another comment in, and I hope that you received it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Do we have any other comments on this item? If not, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council for comments or a motion. Councilmember Brigel.
Can I just get a clarification?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's my understanding, I'm just curious, I just heard that it's going to cost the city a lot of money. My understanding is Mercer Fraser will be dealing with the water and sewage and the paving, and that Kramer will be doing those upgrades. What other costs will the city be responsible for?
So as of right now, that is the plan, that the vast majority of the work, a lot of the preliminary work that has been done for the coastal development permit and the plans and stuff like that were done by development services and public works. But as far as the infrastructure improvements, that is the plan for those to be donated by local contractors. We haven't gotten perfect confirmation, but we definitely have, they've expressed that they intend on doing that. So until we get this permit in place and have the ability to move forward, I'm sure we'll be able to get those commitments. But yeah, we don't intend on spending city funds to make the improvements that are necessary there.
Thank you. Councilmember Arroyo, and then Castellano.
I just wanted to note a couple things that were in the staff report, but maybe ask staff to expand on this a little where feasible. To the concerns about wetlands, it looks to me like the wetland conditions will actually be improved by the supplementation of additional native species and plantings and drainage improvements to the site. Right now, it looks like it's ruderal vegetation that is just it's not like there aren't a wealth of beautiful native plants on the site that is slated for potential conversion. So, but what I saw from these plans and what I understand to be the case is that the enhancement all around the boundaries of the property will actually improve the quality of the water draining into the wetlands from this basically industrial site, and that there would be beautification actually. I mean, I love the area of the bay that's right there. When you look towards the bay from the trail, it is a treat. And when you look towards this property from the trail, it is a utilitarian industrial parcel with a big old fence around it. And I know that, much of the adjacent part of the site is used for fire training. Love it. Awesome. That's not like a beautifully preserved natural space in my mind. Could staff speak to maybe the other considerations as far as environmental improvements to the site? Anything else that I might have missed?
I think you've basically covered the improvements that are proposed to protect wetlands and to actually improve them, as you mentioned. There are some higher quality wetlands that are approximately 100 feet away from where the development will be. There are some less quality wetlands that are a little bit closer. There is a 30-foot buffer that's being maintained from those wetlands, and we are installing a vegetated swale between the development and those wetlands. So any runoff that's not being treated now will actually be treated through the swale. And as I mentioned before, we're 60 to 80 feet away from the bay on the west side. So.
And as far as the aesthetics of the property, and this is just kind of a follow-on, sorry, Councilmember Castellano, are there any ideas about how to make the trailers that are currently not so lovely a little bit more aesthetically pleasing? I know I've been impressed with some of the other, temporary housing efforts that have ended up being pretty nicely made up. Any proposals on that?
There are no proposals, and it's not really a requirement of the coastal development permit because it's not a protection of a coastal resources for aesthetics or beautification. But I believe that Betty will be extremely responsible with the way that property looks once they're occupying it, and I think it will be a vast improvement over what is there now.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Castellano.
Thank you. Well, firstly, I just want to thank Principal Planner Getz and all the staff that worked on this. I really, I thought it was quite remarkable how much detail went into the report, and really kind of foreseeing the critiques that the Coastal Commission might have ahead of time in order to just help facilitate this moving forward. I also was really appreciative of the level of detail around environmental considerations, not only with the final site, but with the development of the site and, timing of construction and, making sure that, no habitat or birds would be affected by the construction. So, I'm a big fan of this, partially because, as someone who's supportive of housing and really spending a lot of time, talking with people about housing, it's remarkably and tremendously difficult to find locations. And so, I know that many staff hours have been spent developing this and just, finding a location. And so I'm really prepared to move forward with this. And I want to just, to the community, we know that we need housing. It's something that every day is affecting people. All kinds of housing, and so I really think it's through this particular project, but on a more wider level as well. It's time to step up. I appreciate that the city is really willing and ready to work on this, and that members of council have voiced their support. And I think this is an invitation to ask for larger support from the community for housing in general and for this project. There's no reason at all. I mean, for sure, I appreciate concerns and considerations, but I just think it's time to do things and to really be bold in addressing our needs, and at the same time looking at that as we're moving forward boldly, we're also being tremendously mindful of the concerns that need to be met along the way. So with that, I move that the City Council adopt a resolution approving with conditions the coastal development permit for the development of Betty's community housing on the Crowley site, including the modifications to conditions 8 and 11.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Yeah.
So, I too am in great. Am I on? I guess I am. So I too am in great support of this project. I feel like it's a necessary thing to kind of get moving forward with what we're doing instead of constantly talking about we need housing. It's that. But I just also wanted to point out, thank you for bringing up the idea or the information about the report, how clear it was. So much work went into talking about the wildlife and the invasive plant species, and it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, many of the species in the area that we're talking about are pampas grass and Himalayan berries that are non-native. So it'll be nice to have a place, and it'll be nice to have a transition place for people to move up, because that's what a healthy society does, is it helps people to grow and to become better, not to keep them stuck in where they are before. The only clarification I just wanted to ask, one more thing, was with the fencing. Now, I know currently we do not allow cyclone fencing in front of buildings, and I'm curious if that's going to apply to this project. I know that it's my understanding that the Boys and Girls Club just put up a cyclone fence, and I'm not sure what's going to happen with that portion, but is that going to be something that's happening with this project as well?
So the prohibition on the chain link or cyclone fencing is only on the inland portion of the city, and since this is in the coastal zone, there is no prohibition on that. I do not know what is planned for fencing for that site at this point in time.
Well, I'm grateful we're moving forward. Thank you, Kristen.
All right.
It's what planning gets.
We have a motion and a second, and discussion from Councilmember Royal.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you personally for all of your hard work on this, Principal Planner Getz, and for your composure when there were some heated discussions about this. I know I personally, this was one where I was kind of pounding my fist a little bit at times, and I really appreciate staff's understanding and hard work on it. And I'm grateful for the robust job you've done, because hopefully that will help push us forward, because it really is very thorough. And I know that the public who are listening or watching may not feel it's the perfect site, but we have very limited options, and we're trying different things to meet what sometimes feels like an insurmountable challenge. So I ask that people who are thinking about this project and anything that they think it might lack to consider the shortage of sites that are feasible for something like this, and the need in the community for this interim type of rental housing where people can move from very temporary housing into a paid rental, establish a rental history, and then be prepared to move on with their lives in whatever form that will take. So I think this fills a gap, and it's doing the best we can with what we have. So thank you, staff, for all your hard work, and hopefully we can just get some good support for this moving forward. I know I'm definitely voting yes.
So, and I'll just finish by saying this started before I was on council. So we're talking about it moving forward finally, but it really has been a very long time with a lot of public process that's gone into it. So thank you. as everybody else has said, and now let's vote. Oh, it says Arroyo on the sign. Oh.
Anyway, 4 yes votes, Councilmember Bauer absent, motion carries.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite Deputy Public Works Isa up to talk about the adoption of Urban Water Management Plan as our next public hearing item.
Is your mic on, Brian?
I figured it was all automated. That's how long it's been since I've been to council. So we actually have 2 public hearings. The first one will be on the Urban Water Management Plan. The second one will be on the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, which is now incorporated into the Urban Water Management Plan as an appendix. So they tried to make it as complicated as possible for you. The Urban Water Management Plan Act of 1983 laid out some requirements for cities and all water utilities across California to basically plan out to a 20-year horizon, looking at the water balance of supply and demand, how water was being used, conservation efforts, and those sorts of things. The last one that we adopted was in 2016 for the 2015 year, usage up to 5-year period up to 2015, because we renew it every 5 years. So we're now doing the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, so for the 5 years in between. In the interim, we've done annual audits every year. The state, back in 2016, instituted new regulations where we were required to basically audit our water balance every year to see where our conservation efforts were, to see what our water balance looked like. And then in the intervening years, there were also quite a few regulations related to conservation. Remember, there was a declaration of emergency and a bunch of stuff, and really conservation really floated to the top of people's consciousness. The Water Shortage Contingency Plan is really the guiding document for what we do in the event of a water emergency, whether that's natural, climate change, man-made, a terrorist attack, whatever it might be, and the different levels of water shortage contingency that we would deal with as far as instituting water conservation strategies, whether mandatory, voluntary, that sort of thing. So we do have, they were both prepared by the city's consultant, Freshwater Environmental Services, Orrin Plocker is here. He's also prepared the same plans for HCSD, Crescent City, and a number of other jurisdictions. So he's here to answer any of your overarching technical questions. But if you have any questions about the plans or what they're for or where we're at, we're here.
I'm going to ask a procedural question first. So they were 2 separate items. Do I need to have 2 separate public hearings for them? So do we only ask questions about the first item first? So does anybody have questions about the adoption of the urban wastewater or the urban water management?
Yes.
No? No, Councilmember Castellano.
Maybe my agenda pack was missing something, but I didn't have much detail of what was actually constituted within the plan. I only had kind of the overview about the plan. Would you mind kind of sharing just a little more detail?
Kind of a broad overview. Several sections. You have an introduction section, the plan preparation section, which talks about the state regulations and the Water Management Plan Act and the subsequent legislative actions that have occurred since then. Talks about coordination and outreach, how the city coordinates this with other suppliers in the area, other state agencies. A description of the system, miles of pipe, types of pipe, how many gallons a day we push around the city, what those uses are in terms of the split between commercial uses, residential uses. Water loss is a big one from my perspective. That's something that I try to track every gallon, because every gallon lost is revenue lost. Looking at demand projections in terms of coordinating with your population projections. So the population projections that were used in the plan were the 2040 population projections that were adopted in, I believe, 2018 under the city's general plan. So we try to make sure that there's internal consistency with the other planning documents in the city. Land use. So if the council has made legislative decisions about different types of land use, balance between commercial, residential, those are obviously going to affect water demand in the city. There's also, these are general templates that apply to a lot of cities throughout California, where things like potable reuse or non-potable reuse, purple pipe, where they're using treated effluent around the city for irrigation and things like that. We don't do that. We have very limited reuse of treated effluent within the treatment plant itself, but we don't reuse sewer effluent broadly around the city. It's just not cost effective. We don't have anywhere to put it. There's not enough agriculture, there's not enough parks, that sort of stuff that we would have to irrigate. So it goes through sector by sector water use, past water use, and kind of where our trajectory is going. Is demand going up or down? Distribution water system loss, that's a big one for us, really based on the type of pipe that we have and the miles of pipe that we have and the age of the system. I think we're doing very well at 13% calculated water loss. A lot of cities are in the 25 to 50% with much younger systems. So some of that has to do with our soils. Some of it hopefully is good management. But that's really a pretty good number in the industry. And then there's a whole section on baselines and targets, and those are really laid out by the state of demand projections and reduction targets for the city at given years with the slew of uses that we have. And then water supply characterizations, as many of you know, hopefully all of you know, we get our water solely from Humboldt Bay, not from the bay itself, but from Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District, and they get theirs out of Ruth Lake via the Mad River. So we are largely dependent on them, and you'll notice there's a lot of sections in here where we quote verbatim from their urban water management plan, because as a supplier they have to do the same thing. So a lot of the things that they say, we take whole cloth, because that's where our water comes from, every drop. So and then we do, there's sections in here about desalinization, water opportunities, and other things that are all just part of kind of the state template. And then water source and supply reliability, and then the water contingency plan and demand measurement. That's sort of the broad overview.
Councilmember Arroyo. I don't know if this is helpful, but it's such a large document that it was an additional download. So it's on the website, I understand, and it is a very robust document, but I did wonder about the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District connection. So it sounds like a lot of this content was developed by HBWMD, MWD.
Some of it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, our demand projections and stuff are particular to the city and particular to our usage.
Okay.
But things, especially the source supply sustainability, when you start talking about climate change and effects on water supply, or extended droughts and effects on water supply over a number of extended drought years, that information all comes from the analysis that Humboldt Bay has done, because they're the primary supplier.
And they're doing that analysis for all their customers, so that's a much greater number than we are as a subset. So
correct.
Yeah, I have a lot of confidence in the process, given that there are so many more customers in that system. So the one thing I didn't see and had an additional question around was the maintenance of the lines. I know we've talked about with sea level rise the issue of some of the water infrastructure in the Jacobs Avenue area, and so could you speak to that as part of the plan or part of our thinking?
As far as what the plan says about what we'll do with dealing with sea level rise?
And as far as the integrity of those parts of the system, because I'm having a hard time scrolling around in this.
I see. It is a large document, and there's with other documents embedded in it. It does make it a little cumbersome. I'm going to call on Oren. I'm going to phone a friend.
Awesome.
Well, we make him sit through the meeting. At least this
Yeah.
makes him glad he came.
Absolutely.
Like, glad I was there.
So this really does focus on the supply and demand side and the impact of climate would have on the supply and demand, longer dry periods, additional precipitation, whatnot. And it's not focused on infrastructure as sea level would rise and potentially impact some of your infrastructure. So it is not focused on that.
Okay, so we would cover that in some other planning documents, presumably, that are internal to the city that...
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Do we have any other questions from council on this item? Seeing none, I will open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back for comments or a motion.
I'll move.
Councilmember Royal.
I move that we adopt the resolution adopting the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. Do I need to read the whole thing? Okay. Great. That's what it was anyway, so yes.
All right. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Moulton. Do we have any further discussion on this item? All right, everybody, let's vote.
4 yes votes, Councilmember Bauer absent, motion carries.
All right, now we have item A3, which I believe you've already done the presentation for, right, Deputy Director Easton?
For the most part, yes.
So now do you have questions about the water shortage contingency plan portion of this? If not, I will open it up the public hearing for the public. Does anybody have a comment here about the water shortage contingency plan portion of this?
Haven't recently looked at pictures of, I think it's Lewiston Lake that feeds Shasta. It's almost dry. And having recently driven past the Mad River Reservoir, you guys are looking good. And from a historical perspective, when the pulp mill shut down, I had friends that talked about the water district being concerned about having excess water and what they were going to do about it, and talking about putting it in bladders and shipping it down because otherwise they were going to lose their thing. I don't know what happened with that. I don't know if you still have a surplus of water. I imagine you do, but I can also say that when I first moved up here in '73 and I was going across the San Rafael Bridge with my mom, I said, "What is that?" And she said, "Oh, that is the pipeline that is sending water to Marin County because we were in a drought." And it was just a pipeline going across the bridge that was delivering water. So I don't know if it talked about talked about whether or not, the water district may see the need to share some of the water that is in Ruth with other communities. That's all.
Thank you very much. So, does anybody else want to speak on this item? All right, then I'll close the public hearing and bring it back for a motion or comments. Does anybody have any? Everybody's looking at you, Natalie.
All right, well, I will, without further ado, allow me to figure out what I'm saying here. I move approval that we adopt a resolution adopting the 2020 Water Shortage Contingency Plan.
All right, do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Castellano, any further discussion on this item? Then let's vote.
4 yes votes, Councilmember Bauer absent, motion carries.
Thank you very much. Now we are going to move on to the consent calendar. I have not received any reports that anybody wants to pull anything. Does anybody want to pull anything? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Councilmember Burgell.
I move that we approve the consent calendar as written.
All righty. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Thank you. Let's vote.
4 yes votes, Councilmember Bauer absent, motion carries.
All righty. So now we are moving on to item C1, where Director Millar is going to talk to us about the trust agreement and authorizing filing a validation action for pension obligation bond debt issuance. Oh, he disappeared.
Finance Director Millar needs to go set up the Zoom
Oh,
in
that's
the
right,
other
because we
room,
have
and he'll
people
be.
zooming in from out.
Yes, we have our consultant zooming in,
Consultants.
and it looks like it's working now. So.
Director Millar has the most difficult technological presentation of the day. I just want you all to know that he's been working on this all day, making sure that it's going to function well. So, well, I just don't want people to be like thinking did not work on this. He's worked on it very, very hard.
It's like I just ran away from
You did run away. It kind of scared me a little bit.
What was that? Okay. Okay, all right, so you're on speaker now.
Great. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This is Sarah Hollenbeck from.
Yes, we can.
I have shared my screen on Zoom. Are you able to see that screen share?
Yes, it is up right now.
I'm going to go into full screen mode so we can help you see a little bit better.
Perfect. It's going to be difficult for people watching on TV, so maybe we could just have this downloaded somewhere so they can look at it later.
Sure. And just to let you guys know that they are watching the live feed, so what they're watching they don't relate. But anyways, Sarah, I'll let you begin with the presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, sorry, I'm trying to get back to the live stream. A lot of screens. Apologies for the delay. It's my computer. Is there anything that
I can't. I'm not picking that up.
We know.
Is there any way to put
okay.
Oh, the mic. He's holding.
Except for that, so and it's giving me feedback. Okay, I'll just proceed with the presentation. I'm not able to see you all, but I will listen for questions as best I can. And if I miss something, Lane, if you wouldn't mind relaying it to me. So we're here this evening to discuss with you the resolution that's before you relating to the approval of the issuance of pension obligation bonds, the approval of the trust agreement associated with those bonds, and the filing of the validation action. So we have a brief presentation. We are proceeding along the path that we had discussed with the council back in April. So just as, excuse me, an update, what we talked about at the previous meeting, as you will recall, back on April the 6th, Mr. Millar provided a presentation to the council regarding your current status in regards to the unfunded accrued pension liability with CalPERS and some of the basics about how the CalPERS obligations work. And then on the 20th of April, we PFM provided an analysis of alternatives in terms of an approach to funding that unfunded liability, which is in the neighborhood of $61 million. At that meeting, we outlined the process, which is here before you again, just for recap, associated with the issuance of pension obligations to fund that unfunded liability and with the goal of reducing the city's cost overall. So the next step after that meeting that we took with your concurrence was to assemble a financing team to proceed with the pension obligation bond issuance process. We did complete an RFP for an underwriter to underwrite those bonds if the city proceeds with the sale of them, and then also Orrick Harrington and Sutcliffe and PFM were appointed as your bond counsel and financial advisor, respectively. Bank of America was selected as the underwriter, and now we're before you with the documents, as I mentioned, to request the City Council's approval of the trust agreement associated with the pension obligation bonds and the authorization to file the validation action. This is all as was laid out previously. So the next steps, should the Council approve this resolution this evening, would be to proceed with that legal validation process. We would be coming back to the Council one further time for approval of the sale of the bonds and the offering document, which is known in the municipal debt arena as the official statement, which describes the city, its financial situation, and the obligation being refinanced. And then we would go to the received bond ratings. We would seek a rating from Standard & Poor's. And once we have that rating, we would be able to enter the market and sell the bonds, and then the funds would be delivered shortly thereafter and deposited with CalPERS. So this is just a recap of the process we had outlined for you previously and showing you where we are in that process. What we're asking this evening, as was summarized, I think, in the staff report, which is known in the municipal debt. So we're asking that you adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance of taxable pension obligation bonds to refund the city's unfunded liability to CalPERS, which, as I mentioned, is about $61 million, to approve the form of and authorize execution and delivery of the trust agreement in connection with those bonds, and authorize the filing of the validation action in Superior Court, which publicly notices the city's intent to issue bonds to refund that obligation and seek a judicial a judgment validating your legal basis for doing so. The estimated timeline to complete the transaction, should we proceed this evening, is, as I mentioned, a further council action, which is expected in September, to approve the offering document. And at that time, we would anticipate bringing back to the council additional details as to the financial specifics of the debt that it would be proposed to be issued. So that is when you'd be finally giving your authorization for the city to issue the bonds. We would be talking about things such as the amount to be issued, the term of the bonds, the structure of the projected savings, and so on. So the estimated timing for the rest of the process is outlined below. Early September is when we would hope to receive a validation judgment if we're successful in that process. Of course, there can be some delays in terms of the court actually being able to do things on the most expedited basis. So that's our estimate. We would be back to the council. Once we had that authority, we would receive the bond rating. We would only anticipate one rating from Standard & Poor's. Then in mid-October timeframe, we would anticipate publishing that offering document and then selling the bonds. And then finally, the closing would happen a couple of weeks later in early November, and that is when the funds would be available to pay CalPERS. Just to give you a sense, since it has been several months since we last talked about the notion of issuing pension obligation bonds and provided you with some preliminary financial analysis. We wanted to give you an update on how the interest rate markets have been doing and also what's been happening with regard to the issuance of pension obligation bonds by other cities in California. So on page 5 here, you'll just see a very simple chart that shows the trend in U.S. Treasury rates, which is the benchmark we use when we are talking about the interest rate environment for the issuance of taxable municipal bonds. Because the proceeds of these bonds are used ultimately to pay the city's obligation to pay benefits to private individuals, that is why the bonds cannot be issued on a tax-exempt basis like your water revenue bonds or sewer revenue bonds would be, for example. So in the taxable market, the benchmark rate that we look to is the U.S. Treasury. And so what we've shown here is the trend for various terms. So the 10-year is really the most commonly talked about these days. So that 10-year Treasury rate currently stands at a 1.19%, and that is the green line, kind of in the middle of the chart. You can see it was a bit lower at the very beginning of the year. The chart starts with January 20th of 2021, and then we just simply show the last 7 months or so of history, and we're almost back to that low point that it hit in early in the year. So we had some trending downward most recently due to concerns about a resurgence in COVID cases. And while that's not good news generally for the bond market, it makes people want to buy safe investments like Treasury bonds. And so what that means for you is taxable rates, which are the basis, will be the basis of your pricing for these bonds, continue to be very attractive. The 30-year rate, as you can see, currently stands at a 1.83%. On the next page, we talk a little bit about, just to give you some perspective on CalPERS and how they have been doing. As you'll see here, we have the history over the last 30 years of the annual return that CalPERS has achieved on its investment portfolio, which is essentially where your money will be deposited ultimately when the bonds are issued, assuming to the extent they are issued. So as you can see, there's been quite a wide range. We just wanted to mention this because, as you may be aware, that CalPERS recently released their preliminary estimate for their fiscal year 2021 return, which was the fiscal year ended June 30, 2021. And it was an extremely robust 21.3% return preliminarily. It's not a final return, but that's what they're estimating. So that is a positive outcome, and it means that the funds that you have on deposit there currently will receive the benefit of that. However, they have a policy that this very robust return will trigger, which is a reduction to the rate, what's called the discount rate, and that's essentially what how the rate at which they amortize your unfunded liability. So it's currently at 7. This strong performance for 2021 is expected to reduce that rate to 6.8%. And the reason that matters to you is that it will have the effect of increasing the UAL that we're talking about refinancing through this transaction. So while the 2021 investment return was very positive, and that's there may be a countervailing impact from this reduction in the discount rate. Until we have the final CalPERS report for fiscal year 2020, fiscal year 21, we'll have that report in a few months, and we won't know precisely the outcome of that. But there are two forces that are pushing in opposite directions. So we just wanted to acknowledge that because there has been a fair amount of news in the press about this very strong return that CalPERS achieved in 2021. As I mentioned, there has been an active market for municipal bonds, and there has been a very active issuance calendar, in particular by cities in California, since we last spoke with you in April. So as you can see on this page 7, 7 cities have come to market with pension obligation bonds, just 7 cities in California, just since April 20th. Those cities have issued in the range of $8.5 to $144 million. So you can see who they are and when they issued and how much. And the rest of the chart simply shows you all of the pension obligation bonds sold in California since early 2020, which is now over 30 POB issuances, totaling over $4 billion of principal values sold. So the market continues to be favorable, and issuers continue to take advantage of it. That's the full extent of the update I had prepared for you tonight. Happy to respond to questions if you have any.
Does anybody have any questions? Councilmember Arroyo?
Shockingly, I do. Yes, thank you for the presentation. This is really helpful to see the figures and to kind of just see some visualization of what we're talking about. I guess my concern around this is not so much in the this part of the process, but in it's more about having this enormous amount of trust in the CalPERS system and paying off our liability in this way, and then a fear that CalPERS still won't be able to meet their obligation, and some concerns about the structure of CalPERS. So going down this path seems like a responsible action for the city to address our concerns about our commitment, but I guess I just wish I knew more about what the projections were for CalPERS, and that seems like something that we need to look at carefully and understand thoroughly before we go ahead and pull the trigger on this. So this step of the process to me seems like it's about getting us ready to make the decision to move forward. But, obviously we don't want to go too far down this path and then decide that, for whatever reason we don't want to do it. But I'm on board with the concept, but I have these concerns about the CalPERS system that are very broad, like that they think that they only have 2/3 of the money they need and are pursuing a more aggressive strategy to invest to make up for past losses. And I was just wondering what staff's thoughts are on that, and what are, additionally, what your thoughts might be, Sarah.
You want to start, Director Millar?
That's a difficult question to answer. To answer it in a simple way, they expect to return 7% on their investments, and that is likely to go down, or they're likely to lower their discount rate. The rumor is 6.8%, and I've heard as low as 6 or 6.5%. There is a limit, I think, to how low they can get the discount rate. That's because the lower that they make, or the lower they go on the discount rate, the higher the costs for all the members. And you don't want your memberships going bankrupt, because then there's no one to pay into the system. So it's a balancing act, and I think it's a smart idea to continue to lower the discount rate gradually. I think 7% is also a good discount rate to use based on their historical performance. I believe over the last 30 years they've returned 8% on average. So having that discount rate at 7% seems appropriate. In terms of what they are investing in, there have been rumors of putting it into more risky investments, whether that's private equity or things that are complex in nature. I think they're always going to look for those returns because the better that they do, the better off all the members are. We could, do a deep dive into CalPERS and what the outlook is with CalPERS, but I think that we would need to, invite them into the room. So that's my long-winded answer that hopefully got to what you were asking, but I'll let Sarah, take it from here, and she's welcome to kind of correct me if I said anything that was not in line. So.
No, the only thing I would add to that is, it is difficult to prognosticate. We have the history to look to, but, there are questions about whether, for example, with interest rates being as low as they are, the portion of CalPERS or any pension plan's portfolio that's invested in what's called fixed income, or otherwise known as bonds, it's going to be challenging for them to generate the returns on that portion of the portfolio that would be as high of a rate of return as they might have achieved in, back in the early part of the history that we have shown on page 6. That being said, the way that we approach that at PFM and the way that we will come back to you to talk about it before you're asked to make a final decision about the issuance of POVs and how much and with what structure, is that we will bring to you a model that we use to try to help you get your arms around this risk. And it looks at the potential future investment return scenarios. We run thousands of iterations of this model using CalPERS' investment history. We can also adjust those historical rates downward in a manner of simulating a lower interest rate environment in the future than we've been in the past, and come to you with a computation of what we believe to be the probability that the transaction ultimately will benefit the city financially. So while we can't answer the question exactly, how much money will we save at the front end, because there is the risk that the council member has identified and that uncertainty, we can help you think about the risk and think about the comfort level that you have with executing this strategy. And so that it would be something we would bring back to you in that final council action, or accompanying that council action would be that analysis to help you, assess your comfort level with this POV tool.
Thank you. That helps. I mean, I think it's really asking about what I'm asking is something that you can't possibly really know. And I realize that, but I'm thinking out loud about the major commitment of issuing these bonds to pay off everything all at once, and then the real concern that I've heard and share that CalPERS in its current configuration may not be able to meet its obligations, and that might start, impacting. And so it's in what way do we commit all of our funds to pay off our UAL and then, get locked into a new, albeit appealing rate, but, and is the system going to be able to serve our former employees? That's the big question I have, and I realize you can't necessarily know that, but we have to assume that it will. And we don't really have a choice, right? We have to participate in this in some way, shape, or form, so this is our only... I'm thinking out loud. Thank you for your understanding.
I would just add that, while they can't be specific as to what that risk is, they can give you probabilities, and that'll come back to you. And the only reason why we can't do that now is because we haven't locked into that rate. And once we do lock into that rate, they'll have an idea of, the risk and the probability of different risks.
Thank you for bringing it back to what we have control over. Much appreciated.
Councilmember Burgell.
So along those same lines, I'm just curious, so over time, CalPERS has been 8.3, and if we can get a rate much lower than that at 3.5, it seems to me that depending on the length of the bond, that over time that we will be able to meet our burden. Does that make good sense? It seems like the investment at a lower rate would, over time, we would end up paying a lot more money, less money.
When they've run the stress tests, the probability is that yes, we will be better off making this decision. I think we also have to ask ourselves, if CalPERS performs worse than 3 or 3.5%, we're going to find ourselves with another issue in terms of paying, because if they were to lower the discount rate down to 3%, that would double, triple our current liability. So we really have to hope that they can at least do 6 or 7%. And there is a way to get out of the pension plan. It's cost prohibitive, but there is that option. So I think, we've been with the CalPERS system for, I think, since 1960 or 1970. And, I think, we have faith, or we've historically had faith in the system. And and until they start performing less than their discount rate, I think we should continue going forward. And yes, I think, getting a 3% or 3.5% rate on our bonds is better than keeping the debt with CalPERS and paying, the 7 or 6.8%. It is a gamble, but I think it's it's a decision that's being made, with a lot of help and with a lot of scrutiny. So,
and on that note then, so if, say, we get down the line and they do go down to whatever percent, or the interest rates even go down further, we can refinance with them and get a different bond? Or
I'll let Sarah handle that question, but I believe the answer is yes.
Yes, so the proposed issuance of bonds here would have a prepayment feature, which would be the same as what is standard in the tax-exempt municipal bond industry, which is a 10-year prepayment at par. So you could not prepay sooner than 10 years, but in 10 years you would be able to prepay and refinance the obligation with no penalty.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to add, I think we talked about this previously when we had discussions with PFM. A lot of, our financial status is good right now. We're not doing this out of desperation. And I think that we talked about, is it the 215 trust? 115 trust. So, the savings that we do realize, if we put that into the 115 trust, that can act as a preventative measure if things should go south. And if we build that up, it could either take care of those things if it does go south, or, as we discussed previously, if we want to pay it off early, we can pay that off early with that 115 trust. So I think that if we go on this with eyes wide open, and those savings realized through CalPERS are put away for the purpose of our pension, and I think that provides a protection from some of the concerns as well.
Councilmember Burgell.
So with that, now I just forgot my question. Over time, so the chances of CalPERS going under for, a long amount of time is probably not likely. The market it fluctuates up and down. So during this current, say it was a 10-year bond, even if it did go south, the chances are good that it would come back up. So where would we be in the south when it's low? Would that be, and that's what the 115 is for? Is that to pay those monies when the money's not there?
So let's say we go forward with the bonds and we pay off our CalPERS debt, and then the following year CalPERS performs, negative 10, 20%. What would happen is then we would have, even though we have paid off our unfunded liability and now we're paying the bondholders, we would have a new unfunded liability. So we would be paying both the bondholders and CalPERS. There is a chance that we would still be saving money, but that is one of the biggest risks. And the reality is that we will not know the savings until after the bond debt has been satisfied. So it is a waiting game, but given the spread between the potential interest rate on the bonds and what the CalPERS discount rate will be over that period, I think we're pretty safe because of how because of the historical lows on interest rates. Sarah, would you like to add to that, or?
No, I think that's really the key is the rate at which you can borrow compared with the rate that you're being charged by CalPERS, and with, as you said, with rates being at at or not at but near historic lows, and maybe pension obligation bond rates in particular being at a very attractive rate. Many more investors have become comfortable with purchasing pension obligation bonds, so that has increased the market for these bonds, and that drives down more competition to purchase the bonds, leads to lower interest rates. So that really is the key relationship, Lane, that you referred to, which is the borrowing rate vis-a-vis the rate that you would otherwise be charged by CalPERS on the balance that's unfunded. Clearly, there will be fluctuations, as has been noted, from year to year, as CalPERS performance, as market cycles go up and down. Fortunately, those gains and losses each year are not recognized in 1 year, but rather over a period of time to smooth their effects. And so, unless you think that we'll do the analysis that shows what it looks like if a certain outcome in terms of investment performance is realized, and we'll allow you to be able to quantify the risk in the near term and the long term of incurring a period of years where you're paying more than what you would have otherwise been paying, as well as looking at that from sort of the end point at the end of the financing term.
So I have a question, and I don't know if it was partially answered in there because you were talking about, so if we get in this and we're locked in an interest rate, but more people are starting to buy the bonds, how does that affect us? So more and more cities are starting to do this, right? So that's gonna, will that affect us in any way as more people do it?
The way that it affects you is really on it's helping you now. It's helping issuers it helps you at the time you issue the bonds. It doesn't really help so much in the future because what we're proposing here is a bond that would have a fixed rate of interest from the time it's issued. And all I was trying to say was that because there has been such active issuance, and I'm going to flip the page to the last page again, just to show you how much debt has been issued of this type just in California over the last year and a half. So it's $4.3 billion worth of these bonds have been issued just in California since the beginning of 2020. And the reason that matters, it just means that, the effect of that is that many more investors have done the analysis they need to do to understand them, have gotten comfortable with purchasing them, and that just provides you with a larger pool of investors to buy them from you when you sell them and lock that rate. So it's really at the beginning of the process. If we were to follow our calendar, it would be, just going back to that page, sometime in likely mid-October, if we were in the market selling the bond, the fact that there's broad investor interest and appetite to purchase them would benefit you in a lower rate at that time, and then your rate is locked, and it doesn't really matter directly to you whether more of these are issued in the future less of them are issued in the future, whether the investors hold them or trade them back to the underwriter and among, in and out of the bonds, your issuance is complete at that point. And what happens to the bonds in what's known as the secondary market, where investors may not hold them to maturity, they may buy and sell them, but it's of little consequence to you at that point.
That's fine. It just, when you were talking, it sounded like it was beyond the locked-in interest point, and that's where I got confused. So,
yeah.
I'm all good.
Sorry if something I said was confusing. And there's a lot of this is a bit confusing, so apologies for making it more so.
That's fine. Councilmember Arroyo, and then Councilmember Castellano.
What are the implications of them being taxable? That's something like if we decided to refinance, refund, whatever we could do. What does that? How does that influence things?
Yeah, it doesn't affect you. It really only affects the holder of the bonds, who's not able to claim the interest as a deduction on their taxes. So, the effect for you is that, if these were tax-exempt bonds, they might only carry an interest rate of, 2% or 2.5%. But because they're taxable bonds, the investor charges you more to lend you the money because they don't get the tax benefit, but that's all, really.
Okay.
And so all the rates we've been talking about, 3.5%, reflect that taxable status. And all pension obligation bonds are taxable.
Councilmember Castellano.
Thank you. In terms of the process we're in right now, in terms of the validation action, so, we're kind of entering into this process with the public, and one of the questions that's before the public is just the whether or not the obligation is perceived as valid or warranted, and that basically just so that I fully understand, the public understands it, is kind of if we perceive that we owe this debt to CalPERS, and part of that is our kind of continuing investment in the CalPERS system and our relationship to all of our past employees. Correct?
Can you repeat that question one more time, or?
I'll try. Sorry, I was just so we're entering into this process right now in terms of validation, and basically part of that is entering into a relationship with the public, basically saying we continue to be invested in the system of CalPERS, and so we're saying that our debt to them is valid because we want to continue ensuring the benefits of our past employees.
I'll let Sarah reply, but I think it's simply this is the process to refinance current debt, and it's essentially getting ahead and making sure that the courts say that we're eligible to refinance. And that way, when we get to the bond issuance, the bondholders know that this is, I'm going to actually let her take it from there.
And maybe just to clarify.
And I'll defer to the city attorney if he wishes to chime in here. But I think in simple terms, what you're doing with this validation is seeking a court ruling that the obligation that you have that is represented by your unfunded liability to CalPERS is an obligation imposed by law that you have the legal authority to refinance. And the way you refinance that is through this issuance of bonds.
Okay, perfect.
And I'd say our commitment to CalPERS is represented by the fact that we would do this bond issuance and take the proceeds and put it into the system.
Sure. I guess I'm just kind of imagining, the rare times when the validation is challenged, it's somewhat challenged upon the basis of kind of doubt in the CalPERS system or in the validity of the CalPERS system.
I'm not sure it's the CalPERS system, but the nature of, the question at hand, I think, in the court proceeding, and again, I'll defer to the city attorney, though, is, whether you have a legal obligation currently that is represented by this $61 million UAL. So is that or is that not an obligation that you have to fulfill in paying those benefits and or providing the money to CalPERS with which to do so?
Yeah, so I believe that's correct. We have obligations to our employees, and each one of those obligations represents a small piece of the larger obligation we have to fund the benefits that we will pay through CalPERS. And one way to do it is to go along and let CalPERS earn money at the rate that they earn money, which has not necessarily been beneficial to the city, and that it's built up this unfunded liability. So we are proposing to fund that at a much lower cost to the city, and thereby fulfilling our obligation to our employees through CalPERS. And there is a process, where we could extract the city from CalPERS, but in and of itself, that's a huge process and an expensive process, and probably not one that we would take on right now. This is a much better alternative.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brigel.
So it's my understanding that the task at hand is we're just addressing the validation. We're not addressing actually purchasing bonds tonight, right? We're addressing the validation, and we'll be talking about purchasing the bonds in October or at a later date, right? So we'll have a choice about what we do. We can move forward tonight and still have a choice in October or whatever day
That is correct.
Absolutely
We are, we're preparing ourselves to make the transaction, and the reason we're doing that is because the market moves, and in November, the interest rates could be, could be different, probably not much different, but that's the reason, we're doing this step in the process, is to simply get a little bit closer to actually, initiating the sale of the bonds. We'll come back to you with more financial analyses, and there will be more time to answer these questions. So yeah, the decision tonight is simply to go to the courts and to submit the trust agreement.
Councilmember Castellano, then Moulton.
Is there a chance that, once we get to mid-October, early November, that we would kind of look at the market and say, oh, maybe it makes sense to wait a couple of months, or is it kind of this idea that the sooner that we do this, the better?
So nobody can predict interest rates. All we can say is that, they're lower than they've ever been, and if they continue to be this low, that we should move forward. So, but I'd say I'm not going to try to time the interest rates, so.
We can look at the
The
trends.
converse, though, of that, Lane, not just to add to it, is that you're not obligated once you are in the position, you've completed all the steps up through late September receiving the bond rating, as is shown on slide 4. You are not obligated to move forward immediately upon, at that point. If you saw that the market was not favorable, that the interest rates you could achieve at that moment in time did not achieve the city's objectives, you could pause and wait, hope that the market would come back. So if rates have gone up 200 basis points between now and October, which, that's not what I anticipate, but we don't know, to Lane's point. If we found ourselves in a market that was not favorable and we weren't going to achieve your financial objectives with the transaction, we could set it to the side and wait for hopefully things to return to a more favorable state.
Councilmember Moulton.
Thank you. I think most of my questions have been covered, except I was looking for specifics on savings, and I keep hearing you say you can't do that. When we get to, say, October, and we know what the interest rates are going to be, at that time we can project how much this is actually going to save the city.
I believe we have good estimates.
Can you tell me an
as of
estimate now?
Today, and I believe Sarah could provide that information.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have that in the presentation, so let me just look at, look at where,
I believe it was
finding that.
23 million. And that's based on current market interest rates today.
So the current interest rate of savings of 23 million over how long?
It's being projected for over the life of paying the bonds.
Between now and I believe 2046 or 2045.
And then all of
Yeah,
that would
that's
go
right.
into this 115 trust, or would it be a portion of that?
We can make that. We can make that decision.
Yeah, that'll be up to council's discretion as to what that is. I think that a good portion of those savings should go in there because it doesn't necessarily have to go to the unfunded liability. It can go to our current year obligation for CalPERS as well. So if we have issues in other areas, we can use that 115 trust to cover that fiscal year's contribution to CalPERS. So it can help out in a lot of different ways.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Burgell.
Lastly, hopefully lastly, so you were saying that we could, in fact, if the rates changed in October, we could push out, for however long. But how long is that validation actually going to be valid? Is it a year? Is it 6 months? Is it 5 years, 20 years?
So I think as to the specific transaction, I think, I don't know a precise term, but I think if the transaction remains fundamentally the same, the validation would continue to apply.
Councilmember Castellana.
Sorry. Slightly random question. Can we put additional money into the 115 trust, like if we wanted to, or only our savings?
No, you could put any funding to the general fund into that, and even from enterprise funds if you chose to do that.
Correct.
All right. Have we exhausted our questions on the bench? Looking good. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak on this item? Okay. Then I will bring it back for a motion or comments.
So as you have heard this evening, this is a very complex issue, but in discussing it and realizing that what we're doing now is kind of setting the groundwork for potential future savings, and there'll be a discussion in October about that. I'll go ahead and move that we adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Eureka providing for the issuance of one or more series of City of Eureka taxable pension obligation bonds and approving the form of and authorizing execution and delivery of a trust agreement relating thereto, and authorizing validation action, and authorizing certain other actions in connection herewith.
Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second. I just want to say that I think this is very interesting, and I mean I was already excited to grow into an old person, or an older person, but I think this will be kind of fascinating to see how the financial system plays out, in relationship to CalPERS over the next. Sorry, I'm really nerding out right now.
All right, discussion.
Yeah, just one. And I just wanted to say thank you. I know that since I've been on council, there's been so much talk of CalPERS and just the issues that have been with CalPERS and the unfunded liability, and I appreciate that you've looked for different opportunities to satisfy the debt, and so I'm interested to see what happens moving forward. Thanks so much, Director Millar.
Also, technology worked great. So, nice job. Any other discussion? If not, then let's vote.
Four yes votes, Councilmember Bauer absent, motion carries.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we could take a brief, I don't know if this is going to take that. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. 2-minute break. Okay, 5-minute break. Water sewer rate increase and wholesale water pass through charges. pass-through charges, that would be Director Millar.
Good evening. I do not have a presentation for this item. So last July, due to the pandemic, we felt that it was a good decision to delay our rate increases so that people, had more ability to pay their bills. And we mentioned in the staff report that we would be coming back to make the decision about whether to implement 2021 rates for fiscal year 21-22 or 21-22 rates for fiscal year 21-22. The staff report recommends implementing the fiscal year 21-22 rates. This will be the last year of rate increases until we adopt a new rate study. Also in the staff report, we are increasing our volumetric charges for wholesale water, or for water rates. This is part of the rate study as well. We get the budget from the Humboldt Municipal Water District, and based on their budget, we will, increase those volumetric rates. So, are there any questions?
Councilmember Burgell.
I have two. So, to start with, so when will the new rate study be done? So when will after this 10%, when will the next increase come?
So I believe we plan on beginning that rate study in the current fiscal year, and Director Gerving is available to give us a more specific date.
We're so lucky that he was still in the chambers.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we anticipate launching the rate study RFP, or request for proposals, relatively soon. That RFP is actually ready to go. The main reason we're holding off is some uncertainty with the wastewater plant and exactly what the capital needs will be. There are a couple key factors that will govern that. And so as we get more certainty with those, we'll feel more comfortable putting the RFP out and performing the rate study. But regardless, the plan is to come back to council in the spring of 2022 with a recommendation and undertake that Prop 218 process with notices to property owners and what have you, so that if rate increases are necessary, they can be adopted at the beginning of next fiscal year.
And just for clarification, so these rate increases, they cover generally, is it infrastructure change and needs?
In large part, the rates are driven by capital needs, yes. I mean, a portion of the budget is operational as well, but as far as the increases in rates, those have been largely driven by increased capital needs.
And then my second question is, I wonder if there's been any consideration. 10% is a rather large amount for a lot of people in our community. I wonder if we've considered or looked at any kind of mitigation for that. Like, PG&E has the CARE program that people can qualify for if they're low income. I know we've talked about it in the past and that hasn't been something we've been willing to do, but is that something that we can bring back to council, some sort of, if people are interested, of course, but something that might give people a bit of a break that are low income?
So Prop 218 doesn't allow for one ratepayer to basically subsidize the rates of another ratepayer, whether that's because of income status, age, or anything like that. That's why several years ago the senior discount that the city offered had to go away. But there are ratepayer assistance programs that can be developed. I think that the next one that's coming from the state, we don't exactly know how that's going to function yet, but that's one option that we could wait for and just see what happens with it. The other option is the council could implement a rate reduction program based on some criteria, income for instance, that would be funded from the general fund, because then that's not ratepayer dollars going to offset other ratepayer dollars, but instead coming from the general fund.
Yeah, I just with 10%, that seems like a considerable amount, and it may not many members of our community. But even, you know, if your bill is $60 and you have to pay an additional $6, I mean, that could be, you know, that could be dinner, or, you know, probably not a full dinner, but it could be groceries, it could be a lot of different things. And so I would like to see us consider that, but I leave it to you all.
Is anybody else? Well, we're having questions now, so
Yeah,
we'll bring that back for comments.
Thank you.
Questions, Councilmember Arroyo, and then Councilmember Castellano.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, and then you said the 10%, that I was about to ask what the average increase would be for a residential customer, because I don't know where that 10% came from, whether that's just an estimate, because I'm just not seeing, when I look at the charts, I'm not seeing a specific percentage. It looks like it's based on incremental increases across water and sewer rates for various users, but a lot of it would depend on their usage and their property and all that. So
correct. The number that Councilmember Burgell referenced is exactly the number that would apply to a single family residence that uses 4 units of water. It's exactly 4 units of water. Yeah. So that's exactly a 10% increase.
okay, but if people have a larger sewer connection, or they use significantly less water because they're using conservation measures or whatever, that could vary.
Right. If they're using less water, then they could see a higher percentage increase, but a lower overall dollar amount percentage increase, because the base rate is a larger component of it.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Castellano, then Councilmember Moulton.
Let's see. So I had asked a few questions kind of pertaining to this item via email prior to the meeting, and one of them was about, several questions, but one of them was about how many people have been making use of our utility support programs that have been available over the last year, during the pandemic. And it seemed like only about 13 people qualified, for those programs, or for the utility program. And then also kind of related to that, I guess I'm part of me is trying to understand, like, what are the economic needs and situations of our constituents. And related to that, it seemed like there was kind of a downturn in people who owed money on their utility bills, but then in the last month there was kind of a pretty dramatic uptick. Do you know the reasoning for that, or did you
Yes, and I actually did more analysis, and the numbers were misleading because we've been moving some debts into collections. So the reason why you saw that spike in the month of June was simply because right at the end of the month we sent out bills. So the customers only had a couple days to actually pay on that bill. So that's normal. That's not anything about the struggle of our customers. We've only approved 13 applicants. I think we've given out over 100 applications. We haven't seen a big rush to pick up these applications. Tonight's actually a great night to plug the program, but we currently have a utility assistance program that can cover not only your water and sewer bills, but your gas and electric. That was part of our CDBG CV2 application. So we already have the framework to implement some sort of utility support program. The one thing that I think is skewing the numbers is the fact that we do not shut off our users. I believe the moratorium will end at the end of September. I think that will drastically change the behavior of a lot of customers, and I think at that point we'll really see what the true need is.
And then kind of related to the the program that's already in place, how much do you know? Sorry, I didn't think to ask you this before. Do you know how much is left in that program?
Quite a bit. So I think it was $275,000, and I think we raised the maximum from $600 over a 3-month period to I think $1,800 or $1,600.
And so, sorry, Councilmember Moulton. My final question for now is probably for Director Gerving. In terms of the rate increase and how that kind of ties into our capital improvement and maintenance program. Let's say, and part of this is thinking about there's an uptick in COVID cases and, things like that. Let's say there was a 5% increase now and another 5% in 6 months instead of right now average. How would that affect our capital, our maintenance and capital improvement plans?
As I understand it, and I think Director Millar could better answer this, but this is less about day-to-day cash flow, and that's really what would be impacted by that sort of 6-month delay that I think you're suggesting or asking about, and more about long-term reserve balance and the ability to execute all the projects that we need. So I think that from a capital need standpoint, that kind of delay probably wouldn't have too significant of an impact.
I would agree with that statement.
But it may affect our kind of day-to-day operations.
I don't think that it would. It would only result in a marginally lower reserve balance at the end of that whole process by whatever that incremental amount is, 5% of the overall rates for that 6-month period. So we ultimately stand to lose that amount of revenue, but it wouldn't, beyond that, it wouldn't have larger implications.
Thank you.
Councilmember Moulton.
I guess my question was about lost revenue then. When the rate increase didn't happen for 2021, presumably that means less money came in, but there's still the projects that need to be done. Where does that money come from? Or basically, who has paid that rate increase in the meantime?
So the reserve balances in each of the funds, water and sewer, are held separately. We have the rate study contemplated spending down a reserve balance in the water fund that was higher than it needed to be based on the calculation, the methodology that we used. We actually, I believe, haven't spent that down as far as we've anticipated. So we will be doing that more with projects going forward. In the sewer fund, we aren't tracking where we should be. That's based on revenue that's coming in lower and costs that are coming in higher. So that's somewhere where we need to make some adjustments.
I was going to say,
So that means the city and the reserve funds are making up for this lack of revenue?
It's basically past ratepayer dollars.
Okay.
Right.
Don't we have a grant?
They're reserve funds within the enterprise funds, not like our general fund reserve funds.
Right.
Gotcha, thank you.
Now you're a supervisor. Usually you're just a council member, but City Manager Slattery. Didn't you talk before about there were some grant funds that were coming down that we were thinking about potentially allocating for that purpose?
There is that possibility, yes, and that would come back to council at some point in time.
If the enterprise reserve funds are too low or something like that. Councilmember Burgell.
So just a clarification, because when I had my agenda topics meeting, I was under the understanding that the 5% for last year was paid out of, that we didn't add the amount, but the city paid the rate. So the money, we didn't add it to the ratepayers, but the city did cover the money.
We haven't done that yet, and that's what I meant by it would come back to council for consideration for that.
Okay, any other questions on this? All right, then does anybody in the audience want to speak on this item? Okay, then I will bring it back to council for a motion or comments. Councilmember Burgell, oh wait. Okay, sorry, I looked this way because she's so lonely over there, so, okay. Councilmember Burgell.
I'm over here in isolation tonight. So I really would like us to consider some kind of movement towards something to support low-income people. I know that I've heard here tonight that we do have a plan already in place, but I would like to see that be more consistent, because 10%, as we discussed, I mean, I hear what you're saying, that the rates will vary, but, you know, a lot of people are single family, and I think that 10% could really have an impact on them. So I would like to see us continue moving that somehow forward, whether we need to have a different infrastructure in place or however that would work. And I guess I would need support with someone else, if anybody else was interested in that.
Councilmember Castellano, then Arroyo.
Okay. Kind of relatedly, I would be interested in implementing last year's increase now, the kind of 5% average. And that, I think, would give us time to, one, promote the utilities program a little bit more, and two, kind of assess how people are doing financially, you know, as kind of things with the pandemic continue to evolve, and then and potentially seek more funds, you know, for that utility support program, and then in 6 months implement this year's increase, 5% average increase. Does that make sense?
Just clarification. So is it 5% last year, 10% this year? Are they two separate things? That was what I heard.
Do you want me? So, had we not done the delay last year, we would have increased the sewer side by 5% and the water side by 4.75%. And then that would have happened again for fiscal year 21-22. So you can, you know, add those rates together. Technically they're compounding, but yeah, it's roughly 9.5% on the water side and 10% on the sewer side.
Over the last 2 years.
I mean, going into place now, or from where we're at today, I guess.
So with staff's recommendation, it would be the 9.5 on the water side and 10 on the sewer side. If you were to approve the recommendation, it would be that. Now, what Councilmember Castellano is saying is, rather than do that, split it up, do half now, and do the other half implemented in January of 2022. So right now, that would mean that we would just do 5% of sewer and 4.75 of water. And then when we got to January of 2022, we'd do another 5% and another 4.75%.
So it was never 10%
Correct,
for 1 year.
Councilmember Castellano?
Right? I'll get you,
I'm
I'm sure she's done.
No, I'm not clear now. So my understanding from our agenda discussion was that this current raise, or the rate raise, was 10%, or 9.75, right? For right now. And last year, the part that we put off was 5% and 4.75 increase rate. So actually, over both times, that's, what is it, 19% or something?
No, but so when you're looking at your overall bill, there's a water side and a sewer side. So the overall cost is going to increase somewhere between 9.75 and 10% for if we go with staff's recommendation. But it sounds to me like you thought that just this year was going to be the 10 or 9.75, and then we were going to add the other 5 on top of that. Is that what you were saying?
My understanding was that the 5% from last year was going to be covered by the enterprise fund.
So, no, well, there'd be an option that'll be brought back to you for that. So that's not, we're not going retroactive. What we discussed was not going retroactive and back billing people for that. And we're not.
The city's going to cover that.
And we're not doing it. That hasn't been determined yet, but we're not going retroactive with this increase. We're starting it as of July 1 water usage for this year. Now, depending on what council approves, we're still not going to go retroactive, and that's not being proposed to go back retroactive and make our commercial and residential customers pay that 5% over the whole year. This is just going forward what we're talking about implementing for rate increases.
And so this year is 5% water, 4.75, or maybe those are backwards, and then 475 sewer. Is that right?
That's what was projected for this year,
Yes.
but last year's projection was the same. So we would be doubling that. We would be going 10 on the water and 9.75 on the sewer, whichever, or the other way around. But we'll be doing that going forward. So in other words, we can't just forego the 4.75 and the 5% from fiscal year 2021. That's going to be put into this year's rate unless we go with Councilmember Castellano's option.
Maybe this will help you, is so last year we were supposed to put that on there, but we didn't.
Right.
We still have to account for that. We're going to pay for that last year's. But that rate still has to be carried over, plus the rate that was going to be this year
So
has to start.
Last year's rate we're paying through the city is what I'm trying to, I mean, it has
No,
to
but,
be paid.
well, hold on. But it's only 1 year period. It's still going to keep going on forward. It's not just happening for 1 year. That rate increase happens every year. And so we have to make up for that, regardless of what we do for fiscal year 2021 and that money that wasn't, and the rates weren't increased during that. Still, those rates are built into the rate study, and since they weren't implemented then, we still can't just say, oh, we're not going to do that now, we're just going to go with fiscal year 21-22, because then all of those capital improvements that were supposed to have that increase going forward would never be realized. Am I explaining it wrong?
No, I guess an agenda topic, when we had our conversation, my understanding and what I wrote down was that what I heard was that the city was paying for not 2021, but the prior one where we took a break through COVID.
Okay.
It was postponed because of COVID. Then, now this year, we have a new rate that's added on to the old rate, so the new rates right now is only 5% and 4.75. The COVID money was going to be paid by the enterprise fund.
Okay.
That's what I thought I
So,
heard you say.
so let me put it in terms of money. So let's say 5%, or the rate increase that was supposed to happen for fiscal year 2021 that we did not implement because of COVID. That, let's say that overall increase was going to generate us $10 million just for a round number. That's not any close to that, but let's just say it was supposed to generate that. That $10 million was supposed to happen in 2021, 22, 23, 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. It was going to happen every single year after that, right? And then the rate increase for 21, 22, another 10 million, combined with the other would have been $20 million in 21, 22, $20 million in 22. So just that 1 year, if it was $10 million, that's something that'll come back to council and determine whether or not we're going to pay that back. But that lump sum is supposed to happen every year, and that's why we need to bring that back.
That makes a bit more sense. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Councilmember Moulton and then Councilmember Arroyo. I don't think we had Councilmember Castellano. Moulton, you're first. You're up.
Question. Oh, yes, now I remember. Thinking about splitting the two rate increases, doing one now and doing one at the end of the year, if that doesn't have a huge impact. When will the utility support program run out? Is it going to be when it runs out of money, or is there a timeline on it?
I think we have 3 years to exhaust those funds. And that's funding from the state.
So if we put extra pressure on families now versus a lot now versus a little now and a little later, we're still going to have a safety net to help support them at the end of the year when that additional rate increase happens, if we do it that way.
Correct. Yeah. And there are other programs that aren't run by the city to assist for utility bills.
So with that CSBG funding, are we able to, are we likely to, I know CSBG funding is often like the same entities can apply again and again and hopefully have success. Is that something we've been able to get before? Do you see the likelihood of being able to get it again as fairly high?
So we utilized their COVID grant programs, which were fairly unique. I can find out if the typical NOFA would allow for a program like this. I imagine it would, if it's supporting low-income families.
Yeah.
You know, but we could always, you know, transition the fund away from CDBG and use general fund dollars as well. So I see that as more likely than getting more CDBG money.
Yeah, I would just love to see us continue to get grant funding from the state rather than use our general fund for that, if that's an option. So but you know, I think the likelihood of getting that funding again is partly tied to how successful we are in getting the word out and ensuring that people are able to use it now. So I think I'm fine with this proposal of doing half of the rate increase now, half of it in 6 months, but foregoing the rate increase at all, or delaying it, or taking on those costs ourselves and impacting our own, you know, much needed reserves in those departments is very worrisome to me, because that just means huge rate increases later, as far as I'm concerned. If our infrastructure doesn't get the maintenance it needs, then, you know, we'll pay later down the line, or our ratepayers will pay later, and the city will as well. So I really want to make sure that we're not deferring anything else for too long, and that we make ourselves whole as much as possible with the money that we laid out this year to avoid these increases. So I'm really worried that, you know, we dipped into sewer funds that didn't have as much available. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we're not pushing this too far down the line. So anyway, if it's not going to make a huge difference to wait 6 months to implement the full increase, then that's fine with me. I also just think, you know, all of our ratepayers are going to suffer if we wait too long. So.
Okay. Does anybody have a motion? Councilmember Burgell?
So, I want to be very clear that I think it's important that we have programs for our low income for that support, whether that's through CDBG, whatever that looks like. I just want us to make it happen as a city, and I think that we can do that. So I just want to be clear on that.
Would council like to direct staff to bring something back about those programs? I think that's separate than the approving.
Well, don't we have those funds for 3 years?
We do.
Okay. So it seems like maybe now isn't the time, but I definitely didn't know that we had that for 3 years. So I certainly would like to see us move forward, and maybe, you know, in 3 years things will change and everybody will be, you know, doing great.
So we're just moving forward on promoting what we already have, is what we're looking at? Okay. I just wanted to make sure that's separate than actually approving the sewer rate increase. Councilmember Castellano, do you want to make the recommendation since you had the 6-month wait thing in there? I mean,
sure. I mean, was it Councilmember Arroyo? Were you about to? No. Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This might sound counterintuitive, but if you do a rate increase now and then another one in 6 months, they might feel that you're not. I mean, if you do it all at once, there might be less pushback than doing it 2 times within 6 months. And I'm saying that because I service the customers, and we go through this every time we increase rates. So, I think, you know, if we go ahead with the 21-22 rates, and then, you know, we get through the shut-off moratorium, we'll really understand what our needs are, or what the, you know, public's needs are. And at that point, we could look at ways to up the funding for the utility assistance program. You know, if that's necessary. But the second those shutoffs go back into place, this program is going to be very popular, I can tell you. But for now, you know, if there's no consequence to not paying your bill, it might, you know, there's no incentive to really come in and, you know, make those debts whole.
And the longer the moratorium is, the longer the bills are stacking up, right? That's always the fear with all the moratoriums, is that they're just growing debt. Yes.
So if we were to just do staff recommendation, could we add that some type of rollout, like a bigger, more robust rollout to so that people know about the utility assistance. I think, I think many of us share it with people, but I don't know how much the public really knows it's available, and it might be great to couple the two things.
Perhaps something that goes out with their bill that says they're going to get shut off, or before then.
Oh yeah, no, we have a plan. Essentially, what I'm hoping to do is once those shut-offs go back into place, that we transfer that debt to another account so that it's kind of a clean slate. So they just have to focus on paying their bills going forward, and the debt they owe as of that date can be financed over the long run. And then that we can be flexible, we can extend periods to make it easier on them, so to give them more control of the debt they've built up to date. So there's a lot of strategies we can use. I just hesitate to do 2 rate increases within 6 months.
Councilmember Moulton? I think this is discussion and not a question. Should I wait?
No, we're done. Didn't we? We're in discussion part.
Okay, thank you. Also in September, the additional unemployment benefits are going to run out. So a lot of people who are hanging on right now are going to be in much more difficult situations. So now that you've said that, increasing rates twice, people aren't going to do the math. You've increased it 5 plus 5, or you've increased it 10. People are just going to know that their bill has gone up twice now. It's a really important point. Now I'm reconsidering splitting it. Also, just because I think people have more extra money now. That's all.
And remember, when we go into the next rate study, in the rate study that was adopted in March of 2017, the increases were front-loaded. So sewer saw increases of like 29% for like the first couple years. So when we have a better understanding of the conditions of our customers, we can actually implement, or we can take that into consideration as we, analyze the future rates. So we could actually, not do those big upfront increases. We could, delay it for a couple years and then start to, have them go up. So we still have a few options in the future to help on this topic.
Councilmember Arroyo.
Given everything we've talked about just now, I move staff recommendation and that we do another round of outreach about the utility assistance program.
I'll second.
All right. Any other discussion on this? Let's vote.
Three yes votes. Councilmember Burgell dissenting. Castellano. Oh,
Your machine's
all
all
screwed
busted.
up right here. Sorry, I'm so sorry. All right, 3 yes votes. Councilmember Castellano dissenting. Councilmember Bauer absent. Motion carries.
All right. So now we're going to move on to our city manager report. So, City Manager Slattery.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just have a couple of things to bring up. In preparation for the hiring of the new maintenance workers that were approved for the strategic visioning, just want to let Council know that we had a pretty good applicant pool. They're going through those right now, and we're hoping to have somebody in place soon, within the next month or two. And in preparation for that, we're consulting with a landscape architect, and we're working on different pallets, not wood pallets, but pallets for our parking lots in Old Towns and our planters and our median divides where we have landscaping, and providing a consistent kind of makeup of landscaping for each of those areas. And so that is going to be one of the foremost tasks that full-time maintenance worker is going to be working on in Old Town. So we look forward to that. And then here at City Hall, you've noticed that we've done some landscaping around the building. We are going to be doing some improved landscaping on the southwest corner by the flagpole. And to go along with that, I wanted to get council's temperature on how they would like to replace the current plaque that's out there. It's basically about settlement of Eureka, and find a new location for that plaque and replace it with our land acknowledgement statement on that, so we can incorporate that as a part of the landscape improvements. And one of the pet peeves of myself, because I have OCD and I didn't realize Director Gerving has OCD, but it's one of his pet peeves of people walking across that lawn there, and we're going to put some pavers so that people have an adequate pathway to get across that lawn and not have to walk all the way around the corner. But the main thing is we want to put the land acknowledgement on the pedestal out there.
I didn't think you were going to get a lot of pushback on that one.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. And that's all I have.
So will you put at the bottom, as written by Pam Pell, Assistant City Manager?
I think we can do that. Yeah, and list all the council members below it as well.
Well, and it was the WIAT tribe approved that and sent it through all of their folks too. So it was a collaboration, as it should have been.
That's
Also,
all. That's all I have.
The landscaping looks really nice. It was really delightful.
I'll let staff know. Thank you.
Alrighty. So council member reports. I'm going to start with Councilmember Castellano.
Okey doke. Well, firstly, I want to apologize to Director Gerving for walking across the lawn a number of times. I'm definitely a shortcut taker. That being said, let's see, continuing to attend my regular meetings, in particular, still a strong emphasis on housing from a variety of perspectives. Working on the economic summit a little bit with Mayor Seaman, and there are ongoing free community drum classes at Synapsis 1675 Union Street every Saturday from 1:30 to 3 p.m. We're starting to get a parade and arts-related drumming gigs, so all ages, all skill levels welcome. That's all for today.
Councilmember Moulton? Yes. Councilmember Arroyo?
I just would like to let our staff know that I always take the sidewalk around the corner. Having grown up on a military base, I know it is walk on the sidewalk. So I have not been walking on your grass, but I look forward to this plaque and the improvements to that corner. And I've been doing some of the usual things, and but nothing of particular note to report this time. But I think I'll have a longer list next time, so I'll pass it on.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Burgell?
Well, I actually have a few things this time. So I have been attending regular meetings. I just want to say that I've been attending the Humboldt Bay Fire Equity meetings, and it's very impressive and just heartwarming would be a good word to put it. I mean, it's a difficult discussion, but to just hear how engaged people are and how interested they are in making the department better and relating to people of all different cultures, etc. So that's been really great, and I've really enjoyed that a lot. Spiff Up the Zoo is happening 11 to 1 this coming Saturday, and so everybody's welcome to come. They're working to get their accreditation, and so they're looking for folks to volunteer and help out with the cleanup of the zoo, getting ready for that. If you didn't attend the summer concert, you really missed out. It was the bomb. There were just so many people, and it was just so awesome to have the community just like happy and joyous and all of that. And then I'm really excited. I scheduled a ride along with CSET, and I just want to share that I so appreciate our department. And if you haven't done a ride along as a council member or staff, I encourage you to do so. The work that our department does is so impressive, and they often think just so out of the box. And when you see, it always is just amazing to me, the compassion and the willingness that the department has to work with people in all different levels. And I've gone out with them on different, I'm trying to plan another one that's just with the department, not with CSET. And I've done that before, and I'll tell you, it's a frustrating job, but the dedication and the professionalism that they use is impressive. And then lastly, on a sad note, I'm just going to mention that a former colleague and on the Transportation Safety Commission with me, and advocate for so many people in our community, in the disabled community especially. Charlie Bean died Friday at 6:45. He'd been sick for a while, and we'll be discussing that, I think, further. But he was, I'm telling you, friends, if you didn't meet Charlie Bean, you really missed out, because that guy was awesome. The Brigel family loves Charlie Bean. That's all I want to say about that. He'll be missed tremendously.
You are right. We'll have a proclamation at the next meeting, so if anybody out there really wants to come and say a few words about Charlie Bean, he did a lot, not just for us, but for other groups as well. Yes. Councilmember Moulton.
Thank you. There are more summer concerts this Thursday coming up, yes. And I'm really enjoying all of these outdoor activities. I rented, as part of a private nonprofit, Halverson Park and Sago Amphitheater over last weekend, and just want to encourage folks as we open up and re-engage socially to maybe look at outdoor venues as an option. The city has some really lovely ones, and there are others, just to keep the potential for spreading infections down. Of course, no one is required to wear a mask indoors anymore, but obviously I think it's a good idea, and I recommend folks, erring on the side of caution. They're already doing it in other parts of the state, and if we can mitigate the spread, then we can avoid some more serious measures like shutdowns that could potentially happen in the future. I wanted to say something to the folks that had come in for public comment, because we can't answer them because of the Brown Act. We are not allowed to talk about things that are not on the agenda, and that's very reasonable, about transparency and government, about people knowing what we're supposed to be talking about. And I just wanted to report that it hurts my feelings for people, or it upsets me for people to say that we can sit up here and not care because we can't answer, and we can't answer. So just because folks aren't getting an answer out of us on a particular comment doesn't mean that we are not listening. And because of the way our meetings are structured, there is one appropriate moment for council to bring up new issues. And I'd like to take this opportunity during my report to give some direction to staff. It is time to talk about real citizen oversight for the Eureka Police Department. I see a lot of good work happening. I believe that the culture inside the department is evolving more towards their goal of 21st century policing, and part of that needs to be a commitment to transparency and accountability. At this moment, we need to prove that our peace officers, our public servants, are worthy of their charge. We need to rebuild the public trust now and create a way to protect that trust into the future. I'm asking staff to work on a structure for community-based police review body made up of non-police members who are chosen by council. Whether this is built on an existing structure or built from scratch, they need to have significant access, the ability to review critical situations and complaints, the ability to review policies, and to engage an independent police auditor. I have other details to suggest, which I can send to the city manager.
At this time, we'll ask if there's consensus to bring that back as an agenda item next time. So do we have, would people like to, yes, sir?
Could we ask for just a little bit more time for that so that we know what we're getting into and what we need to provide it? It may not be.
A little bit more time to come back, not next meeting, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's a possibility. I just don't want to commit to something that we can't come. I just don't know what's exactly,
I wasn't even asking for a time frame. I was just saying.
Oh, I thought you said
something everybody
next
wants
meeting.
to bring back.
Oh, I thought you said next
No,
meeting.
no.
My apologies.
Oh, did I? Oh, at another meeting, I meant. So sorry. So, and what?
So it's just like a yes or no without any additional
comment.
Like, we couldn't wait till after our next advisory board update from the chief's board, for example. That's okay.
It's a do we want him to come back and talk about it or not? Yes or no?
We can't make any commentary at all as far as, I'm just curious, when we're talking about that, I know that there are privacy laws and that type of thing, and so I'm just curious what exactly we're looking at. I mean, I don't know. The new advisory committee has come forward, and we haven't really gotten a report from them yet. And I'm wondering, and I hear what you're saying about transparency, and I think that's critical, but I'm curious as to how that would work with laws of privacy and.
So since we're not having a discussion,
yeah, sorry.
Would you say that you would or would like at this point for staff to work on that or not, and come back?
But I'd like more information before I had it come back.
Well, maybe that was good that your mic was off, because we're not supposed to discuss this anyways. So, Councilmember Moulton, you can speak on this because this is your report. And then really all I want is you want staff to come back and talk about it another time or not, and not any more discussion. But if you have more information in terms of getting a consensus about whether somebody will come back and continue this conversation from staff.
I guess I don't understand. Clearly, I wanted to come back because I brought it up.
Well, it's an agenda item, but in order to get it on the agenda, we have to have a consensus for that.
I learned more about the advisory board. I thought we had citizen oversight on the police, and I realized once I looked more into it that it is in fact more like a communication aid, a way for the police department to communicate with the public, but not a way for citizens to oversee the operations of the police department. And I feel like that is a necessary step towards rebuilding public trust and protecting it into the future.
All right. So this is just, do we want somebody to come and discuss it in the next couple of meetings? We're not making any decisions. It's just to hear from staff about what this might look like, putting it on the agenda.
Well, I mean, obviously not knowing exactly what it is, I know that there's been model ordinances that have been shared with us and staff, and so, we have a framework already that could be amended. I can't imagine it would be a significant amount of staff time.
Councilmember Rayo?
I mean, I have so many things to say, but it just
know.
has to be a yes
I'm
or
very
no.
proud of you
Like,
for
thank you.
abstaining.
It's like, yeah, the Pygmalion effect is what's happening right now. Yeah, I guess I'd like more information about what you're wanting and what we already have and where they do and don't overlap. So yeah, more information would be good.
Councilmember Castellano?
Yeah, similarly, I'm not attached to a specific time frame, in terms of next meeting or the meeting after or the meeting after that or whatnot, but it seems like an opportunity to understand better the system we have and how that compares to other systems and what might be possible if we consider other systems.
Okay, so we'll have to figure
Mayor,
out.
if I might.
Please.
I would just say that it ends up being a pretty complex issue if you get down to the level of actual implementation. I think Councilmember Burgell raised one issue as far as peace officers' Bill of Rights, confidentiality of records, those kinds of issues. It's also a subject matter that's been around for a really long time statewide. And so there is a lot of background work. There are examples of it being implemented, and usually called something like a citizens review board, that sort of thing. It seems like maybe the way to go is for us to bring you a pretty high level overview, you know, rather than getting down into lots of nuts and bolts at the first pass. And then maybe if your interest is piqued and you want to go further, then we could also go a lot deeper as staff and bring you much more granular information.
I think probably what I'm getting from council is that we need an opportunity to talk about it and have it agendized. So are you guys okay with not coming back with a specific plan, but something that's very high level so that we can agendize it and have a conversation? Yes. Definitely. Okay. All right. I believe that's the end of our reports. And we will... Natalie went.
I went. Thank you. Thanks for thinking of me.
Get out and play on July 31st?
And just one last note, I was doing this motion not because I was trying to shoo Shannon, but she forgot to mention that golf is free at the Eureka Municipal Golf Course on Get Out and Play Day for kids under 16, I believe. So.
Right on.
And for those who haven't golfed, you need to go out there. It's a beautiful course.
Go find all the things that there are to do for Get Out and Play Day. We'll have it out all around town. And we'll see you guys in August. Bye.